Sorry, hopefully my Wi-Fi is stable.
Yeah, I saw you. That's why I thought, let me just start off now.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just going online. It's taking ages. It's taking ages. It's taking ages. Good evening, everybody. Saune, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Jitendra, Jai Swaminarayan, Sairam. A very warm evening. Welcome to you all from Women to Women. We're going to start off with Omkara, and then I'll pass it over to Caroline. And the topic on today's discussion is boosting your immune system. So let's kick off for it. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya. Once again, Women to Women welcome you all. Can I invite Caroline to take off, please?
Sorry, am I talking away and I'm not muted? I was muted, should I say. Thank you, Panna, for organising this as always. And I thought, well, as we're still in the situation we're in at the moment with, depending what you listen to, very much to talk about what's going to happen this winter. One of the great frustrations for people like Dacia and myself is that nothing has been said in the mainstream media about how important it is to look after your own personal health and keep your own immune system functioning. It's all about masks and social distancing and locking us up, but it's not, nobody's really given us any direct help as to how to look after our own immune system. So I thought maybe that was a good topic for tonight. So that's what I'm aiming to discuss. So I will just go into screen sharing. And hopefully you can all see that. Go into the slideshow. Is that okay? Can you all see it? Yeah, and you can hear me all right. Yeah. As always, it's a huge topic, so I can only kind of skim the surface and hopefully inspire you all to look into it a bit more and think seriously about your lifestyle and you know, are you optimizing your own immune system? I'll just start with the usual disclaimer that I'm here to just give you information, not to tell you what to do from a medical point of view. So always discuss with your own GP or practice nurse if you're going to make any major changes. But I'm delighted to hear from one or two of you that you have made some changes and it is making a difference. So that's terrific. But yeah, so tonight we thought we'd look at boosting your immune system. And this is relevant to life all the time, not just the current situation. But obviously it has, going too quickly, it has become very, very obvious throughout the pandemic that the people, apart from old age, we know that people who are at the other end of the age range, you know, particularly those over 80, have fared less well with COVID. And there are similar reasons for them as there are for the other people who seem to be statistically more likely to end up seriously ill or indeed succumbing to this virus. And that is people with underlying health conditions or obesity. And of course, obesity will lead into many of the underlying health conditions that are known to be impacting the immune system and consequently making people more at risk of COVID or any other serious infection for that matter. There's lots of research going on, obviously, constantly, and I came across a meta-analysis, which is really somebody that sat down and looked at all the papers that have been done on this topic, and I found 47, and they're just coming in thick and fast, all showing quite clearly that hospitalizations and deaths due to COVID are very closely linked with obesity and or pre-existing health problems such as metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, for those of you that have been around for a few months listening to me, will know that it's kind of the precursor, if you like, to type 2 diabetes. The metabolic syndrome should be diagnosed when people have got several factors such as high blood pressure, belly fat, and abnormal lipid profile, where their good cholesterol is low and their bad cholesterol is high, etc. Their blood sugar might be normal for a while, but if they've already got those particular factors, then they're on their way to diabetes. And we know that they're already at risk, even if they haven't yet been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So these are the people who are significantly at risk. And one of the reasons is these conditions are impacting their immune system. They're not just impacting the systems that cause the problems that have been identified, they're impacting their immune systems as well, and causing similar problems to that of aging. Aging is basically when all our body systems start to get a little bit less efficient. So we know that older people's immune systems don't function as well as younger people's do. However, we also know that we can age more healthily than we currently do if we look after ourselves properly. So age is just a number, and really if we look after ourselves, then there's no reason why our immune system can't continue to be pretty efficient for us as we get older. So it's really important to look after it and do your best to make it work at its optimum. So I'm just going to very quickly have a look at the main components of the immune system, and then how can we help it to do its best. Nature has given us the most incredible body. Whenever I read about the immune system, I am just agog at how clever it is. But a lot of things that we do in modern life don't help it. So it's really about getting back to basics and thinking about what helps our body, all our systems in our body, to function well. And at the moment, particularly our immune system is so important to us. Oh, this thing's very sensitive tonight. So we start on the outside. Our immune system actually starts with our skin. A lot of people don't realize the skin is one of the biggest organs in the body, but it's also a very important part of protecting the body from the outside world. So the skin covers all our important organs and systems to keep them safe. Obviously, we have to have some breaks in our skin for our eyes and our nose and our mouth. And then at the other end, I won't go into it, but we have some mucous membranes in various places where waste products have to get out of the body. So we have the skin, and then we have the mucous membrane, which protects all the areas where the skin is broken, and then lines the entire respiratory tract and the whole of the gastrointestinal tract. And this mucous membrane is incredibly important for protecting us from viruses and so forth that are in our environment, any pathogen that's out there. The mucous membrane, if it gets, if this virus gets past the skin, which it will do if it gets into our eyes, our nose or our mouth, then the mucous membrane is the next line of defense that's going to help to stop it getting in. Now, mucus is incredibly important. We produce about 1.5 litres a day of mucus in normal health. We secrete more when we're under attack, because that's part of the body's response to go, oh gosh, we need more of this, because it contains really important ingredients such as T cells and antibodies that will help to field off the pathogens that are trying to get in. There are little hairs that line the nasal passages and so forth, and the upper respiratory tract, to try and waft anything that's trying to get down there back up again and stop it. And when we get mucus and we get a cough, that's because we've got a centre that's sensitive in our lungs, that's to try and make us cough these things back up, rather than them getting down into our very delicate lower respiratory tract. So this mucus is really important. And this is really, so as we're heading into winter again, when most of these respiratory infections tend to become much more widespread, one of the problems with modern life is that we live in very, very dry atmospheres. When we have centrally heated homes and we double glazed and we keep the windows shut, we get very dry. It's one of the reasons why on aircraft we're very susceptible to infection as well, because aircraft cabins are kept deliberately really, really dry to protect all the instruments. But that really dry atmosphere dries out our mucous membranes, particularly in the nose and mouth. And that makes us much more susceptible to pathogens getting in. So keeping ourselves hydrated and allowing us to have our normal secretions present is incredibly important as a first line of defence. So do remember that as we're starting to switch the central heating on. And humidifiers and keeping a small window open and things like that all can help with good air circulation, and a bit of humidity can all help, but also drinking plenty so that we remain well hydrated. Another point that's really important to remember when you think about your own personal risk, it's all very well if people are wandering around with masks on, but if our eyes are not covered, and our eyes are a very, very important portal of entry for infection, because they are the most delicate organ, and therefore the enzymes that we have in our tears, which is the body's best try at protecting the eyes, they have to be very weak because our eyes are so delicate. If there was anything stronger, it would cause irritation and damage to our eyes. So our eyes are a point where an awful lot of airborne infection can get in. But also our hands touch our eyes an awful lot. Unwittingly, you can rub your eyes and touch something and then touch your eye, and that's often how infection is introduced. So it's really, really important to keep your hands clean and to think about not touching your eyes. So wearing glasses, I mean, trouble is I wear glasses, but I fiddle with my glasses an awful lot, trying not to touch my eyes, but keeping your hands clean, I would say, is far, far more important than some of the other measures that perhaps we were advised to do. I think hand hygiene is the number one, but particularly in respect of touching your eyes. But that's just the sort of first line of defense of our body to try and stop pathogens getting in the first place. Then obviously if they do pass those barriers, our blood supply, our bloodstream contains lots of really, really important cells. And we basically divide our sort of immune response to infection into two distinct phases. We have an innate immunity, which is we have a bunch of cells that we're all born with that are designed to seek out pathogens or any kind of protein molecules or anything that it comes across that doesn't belong in our bodies. And these cells are with us from birth. They're non-specific and they don't have any memory. So they're there just to sort of be the first line of defense, a bit like in the old days, the Bobby on the beat. They're circulating all the time, looking for things that shouldn't be there. And the big macrophages, phagocytes, they can often just eat up pathogens that shouldn't be there and handle the problem themselves, and we'll carry on. But we have a second line of defense, which is the adaptive immune system, which has to come into play if our innate immune system gets overwhelmed. And that's where our T cells, our B and T lymphocytes come into play. And these are the really important players in a viral infection, because viruses don't let themselves be known to the body until they get inside a cell. So the macrophages and all the other innate cells that are floating around don't tend to spot viruses because they're tiny and they don't replicate and they don't draw attention to themselves until they get inside the cell of the target organ. And that's where our B and T cells really come into play. One helps the other, but T cells are particularly important in viral infections. And we have three types of T cells, which are designed to work as a team, and they've each got important roles. But this is going to be important when I come back to some of the things that we can do to improve our immune system in terms of diet, etc. So different T cells have different roles and they should work as a team. When they get out of kilter, that things can go wrong. And autoimmune diseases are usually an end result of our immune system malfunctioning and being overzealous and attacking parts of our body instead of just dealing with foreign substances that shouldn't be in the body. So the adaptive immunity is the T cells. It's the T cells that will ultimately, the B cells and the T cells, the lymphocytes. And the lymphocytes will ultimately produce the antibodies, which are quite useful in then being in the future good at detecting a particular infection if it comes back again. But the T cells are the really critical ones when it comes to a viral infection. We've also got our lymphatic system, which is a drainage system, if you like, that supports the blood system. And it's the system in which a lot of these very important cells that fight infection travel up and down the body to key places such as the lymph nodes, where a lot of production of antibodies and T cells and so forth can take place. But it's a drainage system for waste materials as well, and it helps support the circulation. And you'll all be aware of edema, swelling, and that's often as a result of extreme inflammation, and it's extra fluid. It's actually deliberately deposited at a site of infection, as that fluid allows all the players, all the important cells to move around and do their job. But at the end of the day, when the inflammation is dying down, it's the lymphatics that drain and take away that extra fluid. And if there's a problem with your lymphatics, such as nodes that maybe get blocked with tumours or infection, then you get lymphedema, because the lymphatics can't drain properly back into the circulation, which is a very, very important supporting system for the circulation, and a really important part of the immune response. And then something that we're learning an awful lot more about now, and there's a lot of research going into it, and we're just starting to realise that this is probably where the main work is done, and the bit that we should be most focusing on, and that's the microbiome, this huge, huge collection of organisms that live in our gut. There are 10 times more bacteria living in our bodies, and the majority of which are in our guts, than there are actual body cells on the average human being. And most of these are what they call the good bacteria. They're friendly bugs. They're not all bacteria. There's fungi and different types of organisms. They're not all bacteria, but they all work in harmony if they're in the right balance. And they reckon that probably 70% of our immune function really is now in our gut. And if our gut's not right, then the rest of us isn't right. And we are learning more and more about this, and how the modern diet, never mind all the other things we've been talking about the modern diet, but the modern diet is ruining our microbiome, which is why, again, we're seeing a lot of these chronic diseases that maybe we didn't see so much of a few decades ago. So it's supposed to be our second brain. It's as important as our brain, people are saying, and it's certainly very, very important in terms of defending us from anything we might imbibe, swallow that's not good for us, starting with the enzymes and so forth in the mouth, the acid in the stomach, and then the various different activities that go on throughout the gut. And the main microbiome really is in the large intestine, the colon. But every part of the gut has its part to play in this, and modern life and modern medicine is often destroying it. So we're really starting to learn now how one of the big keys to health is to look after our microbiome. So it really is an integral and incredibly important part of our immune system. So those are all the key bits of our immune system that work in health, work seamlessly together. We don't know it's all going on, but it's absolutely incredible the way it works together. But the things that can damage it and knock it out of kilter are the same things we've been talking about throughout these sessions, really. Modern life, stress, chronic stress absolutely drives so much poor health. High blood sugar, which is a result of modern diets. An awful lot of us have certainly got high insulin, and ultimately may end up with consistently high blood sugar. And this really, really impacts our immune system. Modern diets often are lacking in key micronutrients, that's vitamins, minerals, etc., partly because we've been poorly advised and we're not eating the right things, but partly sometimes because the food quality these days is lacking. And so some of the food arriving on our plate we think is healthy, but maybe doesn't contain as much of the nutrients as it would have done 20, 30, 40 years ago because of the way it's being produced, industrialized farming, etc. Poor sleep. Again, I've mentioned this several times. Sleep is so, so important as part of our daily routine. Our body needs sleep to repair and for all sorts of things. And it also needs the break from food, as we were talking about before we actually started the session. Fasting is incredibly important in our lifestyle. And if we get a decent night's sleep, it's a decent period when we're not eating. And that in itself can be very helpful to the body. But lots and lots of repair and defense things go on while we're asleep. So poor quality sleep and not enough sleep both contribute to a reduced immune system. Lack of exercise. Modern life often means we are nowhere near as active as we should be. Exercise is important in its own right. We shouldn't see exercise just as something to help us lose weight. As we've discussed before, you can't actually out-exercise a bad diet. So we should see exercise as an important constituent of a healthy life, regardless of food. It's something we should be doing just to remain healthy. And then the microbiome, as I've mentioned, if that's not right, that's going to impact lots and lots of different aspects of our health, but particularly our immune system. So as I mentioned, chronic stress causes a rise in cortisol, which is a hormone produced by the adrenal glands. And a little bit of cortisol and a little bit of acute stress is good for us. We talk about the fight and flight reaction. The whole reason we have this sort of feedback mechanism where we get a bit of stress and we produce cortisol and adrenaline is in order to help us get out of danger. And a little short, sharp blast of it doesn't do us any harm. But in modern life, many of us are chronically stressed, and therefore we've got circulating cortisol levels that are far higher than they're meant to be. And this impacts lots and lots of different aspects of our health, but it particularly impacts the T cell activity and reduces the natural killer cells, which are one of the innate cells that I showed you in the diagram earlier. But the T cells, as I mentioned, incredibly important in viral infections. So if you're chronically stressed, then your ability to fight viral infections is going to be diminished. Cortisol also, you'll know this from this, we deliberately give cortisone drugs to people who have got inflammatory conditions. So one of cortisol's action is to dampen down inflammation. And as I mentioned earlier, the immune system, when it works properly, everything works in harmony as a team. And the reason why we have the ability to dampen down inflammation, which is the natural response to an infection, is that if it gets too carried away, it'll do us harm. So a little bit of cortisol to help dampen down inflammation is a good thing. The problem is if the cortisol's there at high levels for too long, it actually reduces our ability to produce the inflammation in the first place. And the inflammation is an important part in our immune response to a pathogen. So the cortisol can kind of dampen down our body's natural defenses and make us much more susceptible to infection. So chronic stress is probably the number one problem that a lot of modern life impacts on our immune system. So really important to identify it and try and learn how to cope with it. High blood sugar, as I mentioned, an awful lot of people now are pre-diabetic. That means their blood sugar is already higher than it should be, but they don't necessarily know about it. Other people might not yet be showing a high blood sugar, but have a high insulin circulation, which we don't measure in the UK. And that has a similar effect to the high blood sugar. So all of this is part of the metabolic syndrome, and what it does is inhibit the movement of white blood cells. The white blood cells, all of the immune cells we were talking about there, they're all white blood cells. You've just got a huge variety of white blood cells. They need to be able to get about the body freely when they're needed. And high blood sugar stops them being able to move around as easily as they should. It impairs the phagocytes, which are those very first policemen of the blood system. It impairs them, and it means you've got an already immediate lack of first line of defense. Other chemical reactions that follow on, because everything sort of the phagocytes do their bit, and if they get overwhelmed, then they send off signals that brings on a next line of defense and so on, and it should all work seamlessly. But these chemical reactions and receptors can also be slowed down by a high blood sugar. A high blood sugar changes the pH, which also impacts those chemical reactions. And obviously high blood sugar can lead to poorer circulation because it causes inflammation of the blood vessels and reduces the ability of the oxygen carrying red cells to get to the important parts of the body that might be under threat. So all of that impacts our ability to fight off an infection. Then in our diet, we have key vitamins and minerals that support all of this activity. And I mean, there was a lot of talk, and I'm really still very frustrated that the government haven't reinforced enough how important vitamin D is. All of these functions, as I'm saying, they all interplay like a team, and there are regulatory cells and so forth that help to stop an overwhelming reaction of one type of cell that could damage us and keep everything in check. They're called immune modulators, and vitamin D is really important in supporting those. And we know that in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly in the wintertime, we simply don't get enough exposure to the sun. And the darker your skin, the more sun you need to convert vitamin D in your skin. And therefore, it's highly recommended that we all take vitamin D supplementations throughout the winter. And I would argue that unless we're having the most amazing summer, anybody really in this country would do no harm to take vitamin D all the year round, but particularly if you have a darker skin and culturally you cover up a lot when you're outside, because it's not just good enough to be outside. The sun needs to be hitting as much of our skin as possible. So we could all do with good 20 minutes out in our gardens or wherever we can find a space with as much of our bodies exposed as possible to really benefit from the sunshine. And the sunshine is the best way to get vitamin D. We can get it through diet, and I'll come back to that later. But vitamin D is incredibly important for supporting our immune systems. And I don't think it's any coincidence that countries in the Northern Hemisphere with poorer sun exposure did particularly badly in the first wave of COVID and haven't fared that great in the rest of the period. Vitamin A is another vitamin that's really important, but that mucous membrane that I mentioned is our first line of defense, which is incredibly important when we're looking at respiratory infections. So a vitamin A deficiency will leave you more vulnerable. Vitamin C, which is a water-soluble vitamin and we cannot store, so we need a daily supply of it, is incredibly important for supporting our white blood cells and the bactericidal properties of our immune cells. So vitamin C is something we should be having on a daily basis, but we kind of need more of it when we are fighting an infection. And none of these things are being promoted as important, but they really are. And then the B vitamins, which are incredibly important for all sorts of different systems, particularly the neurological system, but also very important for our microbiome, which we're now learning is so important for our immune response. Zinc, which is a mineral that is essential for our healthy thymus. Now, the thymus is a gland that sits just behind our chest bone, our sternum. It naturally gets smaller as we get older. It's huge in children, and it's where the T cells that are so important in viral infections are matured and kind of learn their trade, if you like. We think one of the reasons why it gets smaller as we get older is that it's got a lot of work to do in children when they're meeting lots and lots of new infections and they're building up their kind of lifelong immunity. So it's very active, and then it needs to work slightly less hard as we get older. It really does shrink quite dramatically when we get into our 70s and 80s, and that's possibly because of the original lifespan of the human being was only about that long. So we need to support it, particularly as we're getting older. And zinc is really, really important for a healthy thymus and also for all the white blood cells and the microbiome. And zinc is a mineral that I think it's really hard to be getting enough of, especially on a vegan diet. It's quite hard even on a vegetarian diet. So we'll come back and look at that again. And then salt, which has been sort of again demonized, a bit like fat, and been labeled as the cause of high blood pressure, which is nonsense, because your kidneys will filter out too much salt. Unless you've got really advanced kidney failure, your body can handle salt and get rid of it. And it's incredibly important in our mucus and the antimicrobial efficiency of our mucus. So we really need to making sure that we get an adequate intake of salt. We can live without sugar, but we can't live without salt. And it's unfortunate that, you know, sugar is seen as safe, and somehow salt has suddenly been, you know, demonized as this thing that causes high blood pressure, etc. And it's simply not that simple, and it's not true. We really do need salt. Sleep, as I said, promotes the growth hormone, which is needed. I mean, obviously you associate growth hormone with children needing to grow, but obviously throughout our lives, we need to be repairing our body and looking after the cells that have a short lifespan. And most of our immune cells do have a comparatively short lifespan, so they need to be being replaced all the time, and it's during sleep that a lot of this goes on, and therefore poor sleep not only doesn't give our bodies the chance to do all this repair, but also poor sleep leads to a rise in cortisol, which I've already told you dampens down our immune responses. So poor sleep really does contribute to poor immune system. Exercise, so important for health, but regular exercise improves the circulation. It means that all these sort of important surveillance cells that are floating around in our blood all the time, they're getting pumped round properly with good blood supply and, you know, good activity. They're able to keep an eye on what's going on and seize the opportunity to snaffle out infection at an early stage. Our lymphatic system isn't connected to the heart, so it has no pump. So it relies on muscle activity to help pump it around. So obviously that improves the efficiency of your lymphatic system if you've plenty of exercise and you're mobile. We know that exercise helps to delay the negative effect of aging in terms of muscle mass, because we naturally lose muscle mass again as we're getting older, and therefore if we keep healthy muscles, that delays all the complications that come with losing muscle mass. Particularly protects bones and joints, but it also helps the immune system. And exercise, we know, is really, really good for mental stress. So stress is such an important part of all of this, that anything we can do to help reduce stress, which includes exercise, is going to be really, really useful. Now, that exercise needs to be regular and consistent, but it is important not to go mad, because people can go to the other extreme and actually do damage to their immune system by over-exercising. But you do need to make it a habit of something that you are doing every day. It can be different every day. I mean, a walk every day is great. And that with a few sessions of either strength training or something like yoga, that's going to help to complement all the different muscle groups, etc. So it's important to build it in as a daily habit and not just think, oh, I've been to the gym once this week, or I've been to one yoga class this week, I've done my exercise. It needs to be a really, really regular part of life. Microbiome, as I said, 70% of our immune cells are now believed to be in the gut. It produces lactic acid, which is inhospitable to harmful organisms. So organisms that might get in via the gastrointestinal route and then end up getting absorbed into the bloodstream and causing damage, they can be stopped in the tracks by a healthy microbiome. It also supports the production of the antibodies and T cells. The lymphatics are floating around very, very close. There's a layer of lymph vessels, literally just the other side of the wall of the gut, that have got all these healthy cells there ready to react if they're needed. It supports the gut's development to maximize the absorption of nutrients. So if the microbiome is healthy, then you're going to get the maximum nutrition out of your food. If your microbiome isn't healthy, you'll often get things going through too fast and not enough absorption of the vitamins, minerals, proteins, etc. The microbiome itself can actually produce small chain fatty acids from fibre, which are actually anti-inflammatory, and they are now thought to play an important part in inhibiting cancer cells, and in themselves can provide energy. So it's a very busy, place in the body in terms of healthy activity, providing it's getting the right balance of fibre and nutrients to keep it healthy. If it breaks down and we get gaps in the gut wall, what we call leaky gut, this means that proteins and molecules that aren't meant to get into our bloodstream can be absorbed, and they can go on to cause illness, be it autoimmune conditions or infections. So it's really important that we keep the gut wall healthy, and microbiome is all part and parcel of that. So it really is an incredibly important part of the body. It's damaged by a lot of things we do in modern life and a lot of modern medicine, unfortunately. Antibiotics, which thankfully at long last, they are being much more thoughtful about when they use antibiotics, but they're possibly still used more than they need to be. But an antibiotic will absolutely destroy so many of your good bacteria, as well as whatever it is that you've been given them for in the first place. So it's really important to think about that. If you have had to have a course of antibiotics, you need to work really hard to try and replenish your microbiome. Antacids, or these protein pump inhibitors, PPIs, that seems to me the world and his wife are on now. And often, you know, you go with indigestion, and indigestion might be caused by the lack of acid in your stomach, and yet you're given a drug that stops you producing acid. It's so counterintuitive. I don't understand where that sort of belief came from. But it seems to be that anybody that complains of any kind of heartburn type symptoms just gets plonked on one of these drugs. Apart from the fact they were never meant to be given forever in a day, they are just given out like Smarties at the moment, and people are left on them for years. And not only do they make you more susceptible to indigestion because they're cutting down on your stomach acid, but they're also leaving your stomach much more vulnerable to infection because you haven't got that acid there to protect you. And also certain digestive processes that should go on in your stomach as a result of the acid are not happening. So that can lead to problems further down the gut. So those are two modern medical things that really are not helping our microbiome. And I'm hoping that the knowledge we're gaining about the microbiome will help to redefine the way that some of these medical conditions are dealt with. Gluten, modern gluten is very different to the, or so to say, modern wheat, very different to the wheat that our grandparents may have eaten. And the gluten is now highly inflammatory and can cause an awful lot of problems with our guts. So the mainstream medical professions still feel that unless you've been diagnosed with something like celiac disease or an obvious gluten intolerance, you should just eat gluten happily. But an awful lot of people know that they feel hugely better if they don't eat gluten. It really does play havoc with their guts. The highly refined processed foods that we've been talking about all through these talks, all these seed oils, inflammatory vegetable oils, the carbohydrates that are a combination of fat and sugar, all the things that are really bad for us, they are really bad for your microbiome as well. And alcohol plays a part in destroying microbiome too, which will come as no surprise because there aren't many redeeming features for alcohol, unfortunately, apart from making us feel a bit happier in the short term. So how can we improve everything? Well, hopefully it's reasonably obvious from things I've been saying. We need to prioritize sleep and exercise. Those two things in themselves will help with stress management, but of course it can be a vicious circle, and sometimes if people are highly stressed they can't sleep. So we really do need to look at stress in our lives, what's causing it, how can we minimize the effect it's having on us, what measures can we take to help, things that I've talked about before, such as meditation and yoga, journaling, talking to people about it, not bottling stuff up, actually, you know, trying to address the problem. If it's something like a bereavement, then obviously you can't remove the initial problem. But again, there are resources out there to help people. It's important to talk and, you know, seek the right advice in coping and moving forward. So we really need to prioritize these things. And these are things that have been pushed into a corner by modern life. And, you know, we all think we haven't got enough time to do exercise, we haven't got time to sleep 8 hours a night, etc. We really got to understand that if we don't, we're making big problems for ourselves. And then, as we've been talking all through these series, healthy low carbohydrate diet. So what I would call a real food diet. So we're talking about food that nature has produced for us, not a factory, not with lots of added ingredients and chemicals, certainly as low sugar as we can have it. And preferably naturally occurring fats, none of these artificially industrialized fats and oils. Fasting, as we were talking just before we started properly, fasting we now know helps so many body systems, and actually fasting can be incredibly important at helping our immune system to reset itself. So I haven't read anything bad about fasting so far, but the fasting we're talking about here could be as long as 3 days. I would never sort of dream of encouraging anybody to go straight into a 3-day fast, but we were talking earlier about starting by just pushing breakfast back, getting that intermittent fasting going as part of our weekly routine, where we have a really nice long break between the last meal of one day and the first meal of the next day. That gives our body a bit of recovery time. And then as we get more and more used to that, you can always push it on to say a 24-hour fast where you don't eat from one supper till the next day. And then people, when they've got used to that, can sometimes feel, right, I'm ready to go, let's see if I can do a 36-hour, and gradually build it up. But fasting really does seem to be something that the body wants us to do. It really needs some time where it hasn't got food to be dealing with, where it can get on with repairing the body, and you know, really addressing some of the issues that are going on that it can't deal with when it's constantly being bombarded with food and having to digest it, etc. And then obviously I've talked about nutritional inadequacies. So depending on what kind of diet you eat, it's learning which foods you need to be eating in order to address those possible deficiencies. But if it's going to be very, very difficult for you to do that, say if you're vegan, then a supplement may well be necessary. Most vegans need to supplement on their omegas, and there are vegetarian omegas available now. So it's really important to make sure that you are getting those particular supplements, but we'll have a look in more detail. So vitamin A is a fat soluble vitamin, and it's much easier to get if you eat animal products. If you're just vegetarian but not vegan, then you can get vitamin A from dairy, some butter and cheese, etc. Eggs are a very good source, but fish and liver are particularly good, the oily fishes. But you can get vitamin A as beta carotene, which is a precursor of vitamin A, from vegetables, particularly yellow, red and green leafy vegetables. So carrots, it's a bit of an old wives' tale that carrots improve your appetite, your eyesight, but they do have beta carotene, as do most of those highly coloured vegetables. So you've got to watch the root vegetables when you're trying to go low carb, but it's a matter of making sure you're getting the right vitamins. So you will get your vitamin A through vegetable sources. Cod liver oil is one of the best sources of vitamin A, but again, if you're vegan or vegetarian, you're not going to be taking cod liver oil. And the vegetarian EPAs, I don't believe, contain vitamin A. So you do need, if you're vegetarian, to be paying close attention to getting enough vitamin A. Vitamin D, as I've talked about, the best way to get it is from the sun, but we're not overly endowed with sunshine in this country. So we need to be supplementing through the winter, and also thinking about dietary sources such as egg yolks. Again, oily fish, red meat and liver, so not great if you're vegetarian, but the eggs will be useful to you. Harder if you're vegan. So really, really important if you're vegan that you're supplementing, I would say, all the year round. And the amounts that we recommend you take are much higher than the government basic vitamin D recommendations. So there's lots of information out there about vitamin D supplementation. Vitamin C, as I said, is a water-soluble vitamin which you will not store in the body, so you've got to make sure you're getting that on a daily basis. So green leafy vegetables, citrus fruits, peppers, strawberries, apple cider vinegar is quite a good way of getting vitamin C. You should be drinking the apple cider vinegar with mother, the organic, proper, not the sort of filtered, completely clear apple cider vinegar, because all the real goodies come with the added yeasts and so forth that have fermented it. So apple cider vinegar taken a couple of times a day is not a bad thing to do. It also supposedly helps to regulate blood sugar as well. It's very good at supporting various different aspects of the immune system, as well as the vitamin C content. With your green leafy vegetables, don't forget that it's water soluble, so steam them or stir fry them or saute them or whatever. If you just boil them and then pour the boiling water away, you're pouring all the vitamin C down the drain. So be careful with that, because it's really important. Great if you're making a soup and you're going to have everything left in the pot, but don't throw away your vitamin C. B1 is particularly needed to combat stress. So if stress is one of your problems, then you really need to be paying attention to your vitamin B1. And nutritional yeast, which I have mentioned in previous talks, it's a particularly good source of protein for vegetarians as well. And that's a really good source of vitamin B1. Vitamin B12, again, it's animal sources in the main, but eggs and dairy are useful. So if you're vegan, you really probably need to be supplementing here. And biotin is needed for synthesizing amino acids, which make up your protein molecules. And again, you've got egg yolks, but you've got legumes, nuts and seeds, as well as animal sources. And then some of your colored vegetables again, and mushrooms. Mushrooms are quite a useful micronutrient containing food as well. So these are all things that support the microbiome, and the B vitamins are incredibly important for our nervous system, which is why they're good for stress as well. They're a really important group and something you have to pay close attention to if you are vegetarian, vegan. Zinc. I cannot stress enough how important zinc is to support the immune system. This thymus that I was talking about before, zinc is one of the things that we really need, and there's a great concern that a huge number of people are zinc deficient around the world currently because of modern diets and lifestyle. As you can see, once again, the main sources are oysters. Like we all eat oysters every day. I think not, but it's a shame that the richest source, but the one we're least likely to eat, even if we're meat and fish eaters. Red meat and fish, great. Dairy is okay, but again, if you're vegan, you are really going to struggle to get adequate zinc. So it's something you need to think about supplementing. If you're supplementing it constantly, you need copper with it as well to make sure that you're getting the right balance. But it is really important to look at this because zinc is so important for that thymus, which is so important for your T cells, which help you with those viral infections. High blood sugar, antacids and chemicals, and some of the chemicals in the whole grains that are pushed at us as healthy food by the wonderful guidelines at the moment, they can all slow down the absorption of zinc from the dietary sources. So people who think they are eating enough may not actually be absorbing anything like as much as they should because of some of these other interactions. And then the microbiome can be improved with probiotics, which are foods that already contain bacteria. And this is just a little, I pinched this from a friend of mine who I know won't mind me using it. She very cleverly looked at all these cultural foods around the world that are actually probiotic foods, that people have realized when they eat these frequently or drink them, it does help their health. And what it's doing is help supporting their microbiome. So yogurt and cheese can be a help with probiotics. Kombucha, which is a fermented tea that's very popular now. Fermented vegetables like sauerkraut and kimchi and so forth. All of these are delivering sort of beneficial bacteria to our gut ready-made. So there are a number of different things around the world that have, been there for yonks. People haven't always realized why they are good, but they've recognized that they're good for them. And we need to be including a lot of these in our diets now. And then prebiotics are foods that help our own microbiome to thrive. So they give the food for our microbiome. So things like onions and garlics and garlic and leeks and artichokes, Jerusalem artichokes. Some people tolerate them, some people can't, but these are all very highly fibrous foods that give our microbiome the food that it needs to be able to thrive. So we need to make sure we're getting plenty of these. And we need to be eating a rainbow. It's a commonly used phrase, but we really do need to be getting a wide variety of vegetables into our diet to help this microbiome. So just to summarize all of that, to help your immune system, we really need to be realizing that eating real food, low carbohydrate, real food diet will support our immune system. However, if you are vegan, I really would look at some supplements for some of the key elements that it's very, very hard to get when you're not eating animal-based foods. consider fasting regularly. I would start, as we've discussed, with that sort of just that long overnight fast, and then push it and see how far you can get, because those people who do it regularly really do see a benefit. We've really got to prioritize that stress and sleep, and pay attention to the potential vitamin and mineral deficiencies, as I've said, and really we've all got to start learning how to look after our microbiome. That seems to be the key thing now that we're beginning to learn about. And that, I think, is it. Yeah. Okay, so if I stop sharing and see if we've got any burning questions.
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for that. That was very thorough and very informative. We haven't got any questions at the moment, but can I just say that in our WhatsApp group, I've put an article about GERD. So that's like the acid reflux. So hopefully people can read that and get some ideas. It's not all about the proton pump inhibitors, as you said. And the other point I wanted to just raise is that, you know, when you're in the sun, your body is only making vitamin D when the sun is above the angle of 50 degrees. I don't know if you've come across that.
Well, yeah, really, it's morning sun, isn't it, that we should be getting?
Yeah, it's got to be quite high up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why a lot of health gurus talk about getting out in the morning. It's good for you sort of mentally to get out and, you know, feel nature, if you like, and you know, go out there and be at peace and just take in your surroundings, do a bit of breathing. But morning sun, particularly in the summertime, obviously you've got to wait a bit later in the winter for it to get up there. But that's why we struggle so much in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, because it's we're always chasing the sun. But the morning sun is probably the most powerful. And whilst we want to be not causing, you know, encouraging people to do damage to their skin with too much sun, unless you're incredibly fair skinned, 20 minutes in a British sun is not going to cause you damage. And it's much more important that you get your vitamin D than you worry about those 20 minutes without, because if you put sunblocks on, you're not going to absorb the rays and you're not going to get the vitamin D conversion. But, you know, you're right, Thatcher, it is important that it's, you know, it's full sun, not very early in the morning and not in the evening.
Yeah. Should we go with Mayuri? She's got her hand up, so I don't know if you want to take a live question. Yeah. And then we'll do the ones in the chat.
Yeah, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes. If the urine is meant to be clear, but if it's yellow over a longer period of time, despite drinking a lot of water, what could be the reason?
Well, it depends what you mean by yellow. I mean, if it's just concentrated, urine will be quite deep yellow if it's concentrated, which means you're dehydrated.
Oh, I see.
You know, when you're really well hydrated, it's almost colourless. And then the more yellow it is, but if it's a really sort of deep yellow, then that can be a sign that there's bile getting in, bilirubin, and that can be a sort of liver or gallbladder problem. But if it's just concentrated, then it's just a sign that you're still not drinking enough.
Oh, okay. And the other thing, you know, if there's numbness in the arm, in the hand in the morning before I get up, what could be the reason?
Well, so I'm not here to do medical consultations, but you know, sometimes tingling in the morning is just because you've been lying on that side, and when you've woken up, you know, the circulation's still getting back to normal. It can be a sign of pressure from, you know, the spine or a nerve trapped somewhere. But does it pass off quite quickly?
It takes a while.
Is it the same side every time?
Yes, the left side, the left arm.
I think that's something I'd talk to your doctor about, because I couldn't possibly, you know, comment now. But sometimes it is just, you know, that if you tend to sleep on one side and you've been putting pressure on a nerve before you've woken up, and it does take a while, you know, how the old pins and needles, or if you knock your elbow and hit your funny bone, it can take a little while for that to subside. So it could be something as simple as that, but you know, I couldn't give you a definitive answer.
I get acid reflux and I've got hiatus hernia, so I'm trying to stop the omeprazole, the antacid, but I think the best thing to do is to sort out the hiatic hernia itself rather than.
Well, they don't tend to do much for hiatus hernias these days. They don't, you know, it's there. I mean, I don't know anybody that's had an endoscopy who hasn't been diagnosed with a hiatus hernia. So I think they're just very common, and they don't tend to offer surgery or anything for them. So I think it's more getting your diet right, really, and finding the foods that you can tolerate. And Datch has just posted on the WhatsApp group an article you might find interesting to read, and see if there's some suggestions there that you might try.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Smita has her hand. Smita, please speak.
Yes, hello. Yes, thank you. Yeah, you know, you're talking about autoimmunity and how it, you know, your immune system goes haywire.
Yeah.
I have autoimmune disease. So I was just thinking, you know, we talk about COVID increasing your immunity. Should I be doing that? Because then my immune system would go into overdrive the wrong way.
Let me try and explain this. Are you being given any medication for your condition at the moment, such as steroids or anything?
Oh, yeah, well, I have got scleroderma and I refused to take the medication. You know, they wanted to give me this acid reflux ones and some other ones. And at the moment I said, no, I refused. And I was trying to rely on the Ayurvedic medicines.
Well, autoimmune disease is a funny thing because it can be a certain part of the immune system that's overreacted to something. It's a bit like allergies as well. Some people are allergic to particular proteins, but it doesn't mean that they are any more susceptible to infection than anyone else, unless they are being given steroids and drugs that are going to sort of have that dampening down experience. So, I think you can do everything that I've mentioned to support your immune system anyway, and it might improve your autoimmune condition, because a lot of people, and Dacha might want to say a word or two here, a lot of people have had good results with autoimmune conditions by really looking at their diet and lifestyle. So the immune system is such a complex thing that just because one bit of it's gone haywire doesn't mean the rest of it is not working normally. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
Because
from an infection point of view, as long as you're not being dampened down by steroids, then there's no reason why your immune system isn't functioning normally with pathogens. But you can support it by
it's affected. Yeah, Caroline, it's affected my lungs, you know, it's affecting my connective tissue. And as you know, most of your body is connective tissue. So it's affecting my skin, my lungs, my internal organs.
Yeah, well, I would go with everything you can do in your diet to help support those systems. But obviously, I mean, I can't give you individual medical advice, and you still got to listen to what the doctors say. And I sympathise with you not wanting to take certain medications. But a good diet is never going to cause harm.
Yeah, okay. So I shall do what you indicated in the talk today. Thank you.
I mean, Dacha, do you want to join in here? Because you've got a bit more experience than me with
my autoimmune disease. So yeah, I have Hashimoto. So my immune system is attacking my thyroid gland and destroying all the cells there, so that my body now doesn't make enough thyroxine, and so I have to have the medication. But I still support my immune system with healthy food, hydration, sleep, meditation, basically everything that Carolyn said. Okay, it's not perfect all of the time, but I am aware that I need to do it. And, I do slip up sometimes, but I notice when I've slipped up, I feel like things are just not quite right. And then, it's important. Meditation is more important than people realize, because it really helps to decrease the stress. if you decrease the stress, you decrease the amount of cortisol in your body, and that's a really good thing if you keep that, you know, as low as possible, as much as possible. So yeah, I would definitely say make sure, you know, you get in the sun, you know, you get in your fresh air, your exercise, your quiet time, just everything you said. And yeah, and like if you're on a vegan or vegetarian way of eating, then it's really, really important that you make sure you supplement with all the things that you may be missing, you know, because I know Carolyn's given us an extensive list and the foods that are rich in those vitamins. So if you think, well, okay, I might be low on vitamin B, for example, do I eat these foods? If you don't, then you really need to go and get a good quality vitamin supplement. And there are all kinds of supplements on the market, and it is really difficult to find ones that are good quality. But ideally, you want to find ones that are without fillers and without gluten and those kind of things, because you'd be surprised like what they've got in them, you know.
Unfortunately, it's like so many things, the better ones will be the more expensive ones.
Yeah.
Not always the case, but
yeah,
you do really need to look at the ingredients carefully.
yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And expensive doesn't necessarily mean they're good either. So it's
No.
very, very difficult area to navigate. So I hope that helps. But shall I read some of these questions out? Babs is saying, is it best to take vitamin D supplement on an empty stomach or with food?
I think most vitamin supplements tend to be better with food. And the one thing I will say about vitamin D, it's vitamin D3 that you should be looking for when you're looking for a supplement. And it's important to take that with vitamin K2 because they work together synergistically to produce the vitamin D that your body can use. So you can sometimes get them in a tablet where you've got both of them in the one tablet. But it's vitamin D3 you're looking for. And I think pretty much every supplement I've looked at does suggest you have it with food. And I think that's just so that it, you know, the body is dealing with it as if you were eating it in a meal. You know, it's all getting digested together.
And then there's a question that Smith has already asked live. It's about autoimmune and increasing. And then Nit has said, I wanted to ask if you were not overweight, then following low carb diet help you lower sugar readings, diabetes. So basically, if you're not overweight, will lowering your sugar help you with your diabetes? Yeah, 100.
I mean, it helps all of us, to be honest, because even those of us that haven't got diabetes, and even if we're not overweight, if we're not constantly chucking sugar at our system and demanding our pancreas produces insulin and getting these peaks and troughs, it's better for all of us to be on a more equal footing. So low carb is good for anybody, but also low carb that makes you focus on eating healthy, real foods rather than junk foods and fast foods is going to benefit everybody for the reasons I've been talking about tonight, because that's got nothing to do with, although COVID has struck the overweight and people with underlying diseases more, all of us can benefit from having a healthy immune system.
Yeah, absolutely. What brands of supplements are good to take? I like Pure encapsulations. I don't think you can get it in the shops. I think it's an online thing. I can share it in the, but I don't know if my vitamin D is Pure encapsulations.
I get mine from Primal Living at the moment. But, you know, we couldn't, I haven't done a big enough survey of all the companies to say categorically this lot are good, this lot are not good. I think you need to sort of look at what it is you need. I've got vitamin B spray for my mum because I was very concerned. My mum's very elderly and she already takes an awful lot of medication, but I was very worried about her vitamin B. So I thought to save us swallowing more pills, I got quite a nice spray. So she just sprays them. And you can get vitamin D in a spray form as well. So that's quite useful for people who can't swallow pills or don't like taking pills. And they look to be reasonably good products. I get them online. I get nearly everything online these days because it gives me the time to sit and read and study and look at ingredients and everything.
Other than that, it's just about, could they have the slides and
Yeah.
the recording? So there are no other questions. So if anyone's got anything.
Panna will usually put the link to the YouTube channel so that you can see the session again, and you usually post the slides afterwards, don't you, Panna?
I do.
So you'll get all of those. I mean, if anybody hasn't got any other questions on the immune side of it, if there's anything else you want to ask before we finish today, feel free.
Caroline, have you heard of Trulicity?
Who?
Have you heard of Trulicity? They are injections for sugar nowadays.
Oh, is that the new thing?
This is the new thing they've started, and they've started me on it as well.
So, say it again. How do you spell it?
Trulicity, Trulicity.
No, I haven't heard of that. So how often do you take it?
They gave me a choice of weekly or daily one, and I said weekly because I'm already on PCSK9 injections on weekly basis. So I thought, no, 2 injections in a row is not going to help me. But I've accepted for a weekly one.
Okay. So what?
I refuse to go on insulin.
Right. So you're already on a couple of medications, are you?
Yeah.
You're on metformin, and has your HbA1c not been coming down?
No.
So even though you've been trying the low carb, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Are you still on? Did you say you were taking statins as well?
No, I'm allergic to statins, but instead of that, they've given me PCSK9.
Right.
So that should help because my cholesterol is genetically built.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're very unlucky if your blood sugar isn't responding to your low carb.
Yeah.
But no, I'll look into it. I don't know enough about it at the moment. I'll need to have a look at that. I noticed it's got another name which I'm more familiar with, dulaglutide, but I still don't know that much. So I wouldn't try to tell you anything about it now. But obviously, I hope it does you some good. But keep trying with the low carb because
this is my second week, so hopefully I want to see results with these Trulicity injections anyway. Let's see.
Okay, somebody just asked about the vitamin D3 and K2. Vitamin K2, because there is another vitamin K that's got more to do with blood clotting and so forth, which is also important. But for the vitamin D, it's vitamin K2. And I say you can either get them as a combined tablet or you can buy them separately. And you can take 2,000 to 3,000 international units a day. I think the government recommendation is something ridiculously small, like 50. But through the winter, it doesn't hurt to go up even to 4,000 units. So really, really important. And I just wish they'd emphasized it more because we're heading into another winter and probably still a huge part of this population not taking vitamin D. Yes, vitamin K is different to vitamin K2. Foods that are good for the gut biome are good naturally fibrous foods, mostly the vegetables. So the more fibrous the vegetable, the more soluble fibre. There's 2 types of fibre, soluble and insoluble, and you need a good combination of both. But some of the foods that will really help you are the fermented foods, the kefirs, the kombuchas, the sauerkrauts and kimchis, all of those. And naturally, if you eat yogurt, then obviously the bio yogurts contain good probiotics as well.
Does
I can't think of any good zinc-containing foods for vegetarians. That's the problem. I don't know if you're any better than me, Dacia, but most of the really good zinc sources are animal, unfortunately.
So, yeah, unfortunately they are. Example of food to improve zinc. No, I'd say then it's supplementation, isn't it, really?
Yeah, some
I mean, obviously
nuts may well have some. The problem is that to get the same quantities that you'd get from the animal sources, you'd have to eat a lot, and then nuts can be quite high in carbs and certainly high in fats. If you're trying to lose weight, so you're kind of fighting that particular battle a lot. So I really think if you're particularly vegan, so you can't utilize the dairy sources, then you're really looking at supplements.
Yeah, I totally would agree.
Well, you've been very quiet tonight.
Pumpkin seeds are rich in
it,
zinc.
That's
Mayuri said.
Yeah.
okay. I think we shall call it a day now.
Yeah. I'm going to say, Panna, unfortunately, fortunately for me, I've got a couple of 1 week holidays coming up, and I'm busy in between. So it's probably going to be 5 weeks before I can really do another session. So
unless Laksha wants to do one in between.
Carolyn did ask me, and I'm just on the last bit of my course. So I would also appreciate having a little break so that I can just focus on that.
Fine. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm looking at the 19th of October, just 5 weeks.
Yeah, that should be fine.
How are you for that, Dacia?
Yeah, because my diary is blank from that point onwards.
Hey, you'll be dancing.
I will, hopefully, yes.
Right, well, let's make it then. And I was going to suggest, I didn't know whether you thought maybe a bit more on the microbiome. Would people be interested in that? Or fasting?
Yeah, that should be great.
Is there anything that people would prefer, those of you that are still on the line?
Yeah, fasting.
Fasting. Okay. In the meantime, Dacia, I promised them earlier that I'd put a few links to some good information on fasting, because a couple of the ladies are being told off by their families for fasting.
Okay.
So we'll post a couple of links for you in the meantime, but we'll do fasting next time then. Okay.
Thank you very much again.
All right.
Caroline.
Well, I hope you have a good few weeks in between. And
I just wanted to ask something to Daksha. I saw you go on the conference.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes. We posted in the wrong group today.
Yeah. Anything on diabetics that you could give us information that could help us?
Well, that thing that we went to today was to educate GPs.
Oh.
So we were telling the GPs that they need to recommend low carbohydrate diets to their patients so that they can reverse the diabetes. The things that they talked about in the conference, it really was very much GP related. It was very much, it wasn't anything that I could be able to pass on to you, because even I didn't really understand it. So we just had a table there with our information for them to come to for their breaks and their when they have a free lunchtime. So they would come and say, what are these sugar, like we've shared with you before, sugar infographics, because not all GPs across the country still know about this.
No.
So it's spreading the word, really. So I'd love to be able to tell you what they talked about, but I didn't really understand it either.
It did seem a bit complicated. I thought if there are any tips or anything.
No, it was literally for the GPs so that they can be better GPs for the patients.
Yeah.
So it was about how they should talk to patients and you know, so that patients feel comfortable telling them their problems, you know, because if you go to the GP and the GP is not nice to you,
no, they just refer you to dietitian, and dietitian will give you a whole list of things which we shouldn't be eating, some of it, you know.
Yes, they stick to the guidelines, unfortunately.
So we were there to sort of say, look, you know, the
doesn't help
guidelines,
them.
the guidelines we have at the moment that you are sharing with the patients isn't really
that's
helping
good,
the patients.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Yeah, thank you.
Carolyn's there tomorrow, but not with GPs, aren't you?
Yes, I think the nurses are there tomorrow, but David Unwin, who is the GP that really kind of kicked off all the low carb stuff in the UK, he's speaking to the nurses tomorrow. So that will be good, because we'll be there with our table, and then they'll be hearing from him as well. So hopefully they'll go home with the right messages.
Yeah,
but,
I think you'll get much more interest tomorrow.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, he's there, isn't he? So
yeah,
and he's very charismatic and very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Thank you today for everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you. No, thank you to
very
all of you.
much.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
I'll see you all in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, look
Bye,
after
all.
yourself.
Okay.
Can I just
Bye-bye.
update?
Good night.
Can I just update
Thank you.
Sorry,
Can I
go on.
update events, please? Thank you very much again, Caroline and Daksha, for putting in your time today. We had a brilliant Sunday with the astrologer, and yes, it was great.
No.
It was cute.
No way. This is health lecture.
We had a great time, like I said, and what he mentioned to some of us was very true. So as well. Anyway, beside that, tomorrow we have prostate cancer at 8 o'clock. So try and join in for that if anybody is keen on knowing the pros and cons on prostate cancer. And it is by Dr. Jyoti Shah. She'll be talking about it, and she works with Macmillan Cancer. So she's very, very much knowledgeable about it. After that, we have got reverse diabetes on the 30th. So something for us to learn with that as well. And in between, as I've been putting my cases on various different cancers talk. So as soon as the dates have been confirmed, I shall put them out in the links. Friday, we have Zoom. We have yoga, Zoom, half an hour, and then 45 minutes of entertainment. And then Saturday, again, 1.5 hours of yoga. So do not forget to join in for the yoga. And then Monday, again, we have Zumba, 45 minutes, which is very good. All three things are very good for our body, as Caroline has said before. The yoga is, what's this guy's name? Oh my God, I forgot his name.
Ghanshyam.
That Indian guy.
Ghanshyam.
No. Nina's yoga, her guru.
Ramdevji.
Oh my God. Ramdevji. Yeah, Ramdevji. She specialized by Ramdevji, and she also taught Ghanshyam Bhai, who did last week Saturday, and more stretch work and all that was brilliant. Last Saturday was brilliant as well.
Yep,
so try and join
absolutely.
our yoga and Zumba, which is very good for our body. And as we all want to lose weight and learn how to eat low calorie, with real food, low carb, real food. So this is all going to help us. Anyway, looking forward to see you all tomorrow for prostate cancer. So join in and have a good evening. Early
Can
night
we have
today.
the slides? Can we have today's slides?
Yeah, Panna will post them for you.
Just give me tonight, because it takes time to jump onto my cloud and then come
that's
on my
fine.
phone.
Thank you.
So I will eventually put it in. Thank you. Thank you very much again, Caroline, and all the participants who joined in. And Daksha, Have a lovely
Thank you. And you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you all
Thank you,
soon.
everybody.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.